For a long time in the ecosystem, the first question that any aspiring founder thought of was, why do people need this product? While the sentiment was an extremely good representation of an Indian consumer's spending habits, a decade or two ago, a lot has changed over time. With the continuing effects of liberalization and the creation of a huge market of Indian consumers with a propensity to pay for convenience, the question is now not just about need, but rather who would be willing to pay for a product or service.
It was with this idea in mind that two Stanford students created not just a startup, but an entirely new market in India. Building onto the idea of quick commerce, Zepto's creation of an incredibly efficient and optimized model to ensure deliveries in just 10 minutes has revolutionized the field of quick commerce, making waves so large that even existing giants in the industry turned their heads in order to make an attempt to compete in this sector. Zepto's continuous innovation has allowed it to emerge as a market leader in the hyperlocal delivery space.
Our next session for the day is a candid conversation with one of the brightest minds in the Indian startup ecosystem, Mr. Adit Palicha. Mr. Palicha is the founder and CEO of Zepto, a startup founded by two then 19-year-old dropouts from Stanford less than a year ago. Zepto recently raised $200 million in its Series D from investors such as Y Combinator Continuity, Nexus Venture Partners, and Glade Brook Capital. If this isn't a testament to the rapid growth of Zepto, the company witnessed a whopping 946% user growth between December 2021 and March 2022. Mr. Palicha is the archetypical passionate founder, which any startup with ambitious growth goals needs to match the execution with the fundraising.
And moderating this session, we have Mr. Ayush Wadhwa, who also moderated yesterday's fireside chat with Mr. Piyush Shah, the co-founder of InMovie. He's the founder and creative director of Owl Media, an award-winning creative tech agency and video production house. He's a BITS Pilani alumnus and a former member of the CEL BITS Pilani. He has created over 1,100 videos in collaboration with leading names in the industry, such as Cred and Mr. Ankur Warikoo. Having him as a moderator always guarantees an extremely engaging and enlightening conversation, which never seems to last long enough. So now I'd like to hand over the stage to you, Mr. Ayush, to get this conversation started.
Wow, that was a very, very heavy and pressure-inducing introduction. I think I'm going to start the conversation with that. Firstly, hi Adit.
Yes.
Very, very excited to chat with you. And I think I've been a Zepto user, just like a lot of folks on this chat. I want to start with what like this guy mentioned in your introduction. You're one of the smartest folks. People are giving Zepto like names. People are like the kind of branding and marketing that has been happening around you and the company is incredible. It's insane. It's at a crazy scale. I want to understand how it impacts you personally. It must be, isn't it pressurizing? Like, does it like affect you on a day-to-day level ki boss ye to bahut like this is a lot of expectations on me?
Yeah, no, I think before I get that, it's great to chat with you, Ayush, and I've been excited for this conversation for quite some time. I think the introduction was very generous, probably a bit too generous. I, I think it was a lot of kind words that maybe might be giving me more credit than is due, but I do really appreciate I do really appreciate this platform and yeah, I mean I think the to answer your question, we we've scaled obviously in an incredibly short period of time, and we see that as an advantage because when we look at this business, the faster you scale, the cheaper operating costs get, the harder it is for the next person to acquire incremental customers. So there's sort of this, when you look at businesses, there are network effects. If you're a social media company or a traditional, let's say, network to network or peer to peer business, we don't have network effects per se, but we do have pretty strong economies of scale benefits that make it harder or easier depending
Right.
on level of scale that you have. So that is one context. It's the reason why we've grown fast. In terms of how it's affecting me personally, I think the I think the fact of the matter is that we've got genuinely such a strong team, and that makes life a lot easier. I think if it
Hmm.
was me involved in the complexity of day-to-day operations as I was maybe 6 months ago or even a few months ago, right? it would make it a lot harder, right? But because we've got a team that's scaled pretty well, an executive team that's got a lot of maturity and a lot of experience,
Hmm.
that puts us in a position where Kevali and I can actually just focus on projects that might not be impactful tomorrow or day after tomorrow, but could be impactful, 2 quarters from now, 4 quarters from now, right? And that involves everything from the traditional projects founders work on, like fundraising or non-equity capital, to launching new categories like Zepto Cafe and a few other things that are on the pipeline. But to summarize, I think having a great team has made me uh, you know has made it easier for me to handle the situation. I think we've
Right.
shared the responsibility a little bit, which is a good thing. So I'm thankfully still I still have a hold of my senses at this scale.
That's incredible. And now that you're talking about team building, in fact, I had a couple of questions. And yesterday we had a very similar conversation with Piyush as well, that no matter what the startup is, no matter what the product or service is, the team is always one of the modes for any startup. How important like that, especially the first 100, 200 people are.
Yeah,
I want to take
absolutely.
a step back, ask you a slightly controversial question. So,
Sure.
forgive me if this goes beyond, but as a young founder, and I've seen this myself, that initially when I was scaling from, let's say, one to the first 30 people in my company, um, I had to prove myself at every stage, like it's as if the older folks who had 8, 9 years of like industry experience used to work with me, used to believe in my vision, but also used to look at me with a sly of doubt that
Yeah,
now this guy will mess up. Now this guy will take that wrong decision, which was and I don't know how to tackle that initially.
yeah, yeah.
Did you have that phase? If yes, how do you tackle such a phase? Because there are a lot of young folks here in, colleges in first year, second year, and potentially a lot of founders as well. So
Yeah.
how do you navigate through this entire route?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and it's not when you look at sort of credibility building for a founder, right?
Hmm.
It's not just internal credibility building, and it's also external, whether it's customers, partners, vendors, anybody that's making an investment, whether of bandwidth, whether of capital, or even of just general business scale, right? Those people need credibility in the people that are running the company. In terms of my experience with this, frankly, obviously, you and I were both young founders, and there is some dynamic there, especially as things scale. Um, it, it the the burden becomes more. But in general, what I've experienced, I personally think that the credibility building journey for me would probably not have been different if I was 19, or if I was 29, or even if I was 35. And I think every founder has to go through that, because effectively what you're asking a founder to do is to go from being an ordinary person. If you're building, let's say, with the ambition of a billion, $5 billion company, going from an ordinary person to, let's say, a $5 billion company CEO, in the span of a few years with no prior experience, you're basically asking somebody to be extraordinary. So when you talk to large scale venture capital investors, growth investors, they'll tell you the same thing, right? Which is, for us, like the amount of people there is like the percentage of people that can make it there is such a small percent that everybody is viewed with some level of skepticism, right?
Right.
If it's someone that's too old, does this person have too much baggage to build a new age company? If it's someone that's too young, does this person have the gravitas to lead a team? Right? All sorts of different nuances. I think
Right.
for us, so for Kevali and I, the way that we approached it is, and this was true whether you're a young founder or a middle-aged founder, in my opinion at least, because I honestly didn't at least in the early days, didn't feel as much pushback because we were young, precisely because Kevin and I took an approach of building what we call a staircase of credibility, right? Which is, if we can, like you mentioned, prove ourselves step by step, then there's a positive flywheel that kicks in, where now we get to a point where it doesn't matter anymore. So the way that worked is, if we started on the ground where we've got no credibility, we're just two kids with an idea, the first thing that we had to do is that we had to show some execution, right? So we
Right.
built the first iteration of the product ourselves. We launched early versions of what was then called Kirana Card,
Hmm.
in bits and pieces, and saw scale, right? A very small amount of scale, but saw some scale, and and this was in the matter of like 45, 50 days. We went from, hey, this is a cool idea, to, okay, hundreds if not thousands of people are using something that we just put together in like a couple of weeks, and now we know that there's something there, right? So that was the first step of credibility for us, right? That first step of credibility made it easier for someone like a Nexus Venture Partners to come in and say, wow, these guys have executed in a really short period of time, maybe they're young, etc., but the results are right here in front of me. Let's invest in these people. They've proved that there's something there, and they've proved that they can do things quickly that would be difficult difficult to do on a whim, right? So they come in with their first check of capital. If you convince Nexus to give you that check based on that base, now you've got a second step, which is you've got a very credible investor
Right.
giving you multiple millions of dollars to build the early version of your business. At that point, you can go to senior executives that you want to hire and say, hey, I've got the early version of this product that's working, and I've got cash, and we're building a great team. And that executive will come in and say, these guys have got capital from a great investor. That gives him the comfort to join us. At that point, now you've got a senior executive. Now, if I need to onboard, let's say, an important vendor to scale, that important vendor goes and looks at a company and says, wow, they've got someone here that's senior leader from Flipkart and has done
Right.
some excellent work over like a 15-year career. These guys must be serious, right? And they've got capital from a great investor, and they've got early signs of success in a short period of time. So it's like the staircase to credibility. Then you get the vendor, and then you get to a certain scale, and you raise your Series B. So it's like the staircase, but it always starts with execution, and then you've got to keep extrapolating from that bout of initial execution. Is like the way that we approached it.
Interesting. And I think this is a fairly staggered staircase. Like, I'm sure the first step must be the highest, and then the height of that next step decreases every single time you increase your credibility. And one thing that I liked is that this execution first approach. Because without proof of work, nobody's gonna give you anything, which I feel is a mindset that a lot of folks who, and this question is something which we get a lot, especially I'm sure CL folks get a lot. I want to start up, but I don't know what to do. I don't know what problems to solve. They just have this notion of starting up. Okay, I'm gonna take a step back quickly. You talked a lot about hiring and team building. I want to know like 2-3 points about like the culture at Zepto. There must be, every company has a very different fabric. Like they're built very differently, but at the same time, how the interpersonal relations happen within that organization. And I feel this is a very, very important thing. So I want to know and dive deep into how did you structure that culture? What were some new things probably that you introduced? A little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's actually a phenomenal question. For us, what I'll say is, okay, just one pretext before I jump into this answer.
Okay.
Is I think there is some slightly unhealthy obsession in India with the founder, right? And I think that's somewhat unwarranted. Like this introduction is also nicer than it needed to be. But people say, it's there's a company that's successful, it's this is the man, right? Like, and that person gets lifted on a pedestal, which is fine.
Right.
I personally think it's significantly more nuanced than that, right? And I genuinely don't think like it's as much because of the work that Keval and I did, as it is the work of the executive team, as it is the work of the people that are on the ground, right? And I don't mean that just to say it, but genuinely I feel like that obsession can get unhealthy. So when I go and answer this question, don't get me the wrong way. So although I don't think that founders are the be all and end all of a company's success, it requires everything, including the founders, right? It's a critical point, but everything else is almost as critical. What I can say that is is very founder centric in a company is culture. And when I've spoken to CEOs of companies in Silicon Valley, what they'll tell you upfront is that the personality of the company is almost always a reflection of the personality of the founders, right? In some form or fashion.
Interesting.
It's kind of poetic because people don't do what you, or people don't imbibe values that you tell them to imbibe. They imbibe values that they see, right? And if the first people of the company are behaving a certain way, it creates a flywheel that ends up spreading across the company usually. And obviously there's lots of nuance, but some of the key principles. I think what Keval and I were lucky enough to have mentors that told us this on day one, right? That said, what you do is going to happen when what you do with 5 people will be the same. The approach that you take to a decision when you've got 5 people is the same approach to a decision that your company will take when you've got 1,000 people, right? And so be very careful about not just the decisions you make, but how you make them, how you approach them, and how you treat other people.
Right.
And for us, I think the fabric of the culture at Zepto is very it's 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 very transparent, right? I think that's probably the biggest principle, which is we don't beat around the bush. If something is going well, it's going well. If it's not going well, it's
Hmm.
not going well. And there's a lot of transparency there, and it's also that there's also a lot of as a part of that transparency, there's a lot of trust in what people say. So if someone commits a metric, right, and says, even if it's a corridor conversation, someone says, yeah, I can get this to X, this number to X, or last mile cost can get to Y, right? We take all of that seriously. Right? If someone says something, we trust, and we have this, we believe in the gravitas of the person to say, actually, this person means what he.
Hmm.
So there are not things thrown around, right? There are only serious, transparent conversations that happen at Zepto. I think that's one of the things that we really strive for. Other than that, one of the other core principles is obviously rigor, attention to detail. We've got a very complex business. It's a lot of intricacies in logistics that mean you can't afford to you almost can't afford to look at the big picture, right? You have to be in the tiniest of details,
Right.
because otherwise the business starts operating incredibly inefficiently, right? So attention to detail and rigor is the second piece. And I think the third most important part of the culture is, so I would say, like transparency, rigor, and like the third most important tenet that I would probably push for is, there are a couple that are coming to mind, but I would say self-awareness is also pretty important, right? Like the understanding that, like, people are very upfront to say that this is something that I could have done better, this is something that I'm doing really well, and we should double down on it. So I think those three things are pieces that we keep in mind. There are also some things that, for example, Kevalia and I did, that we see in the company, which is not really a massive deal, but we're kind of amused by it. Like, one of the things that I do that I'm not entirely happy with is, I'm actually not very as a person, I'm not very celebratory of wins, right? I usually only focus on what's going wrong, even if we're winning, right? So always there's always something that can
Wow.
be done
Yeah.
better, which means
Hmm.
that I saw, at least in the mid stages of the company, that people, there would be an insane metric that was delivered, and people would just pretend like, yeah, okay, let's move on to the next challenge, right? Which was a problem that we needed to fix, because then that has like demoralizing impacts in the long term. So that's something that we fixed, and both Keval and I said we need to do this personally as well. So there are bits and pieces there, but I think the three tenets are, like I mentioned: self-awareness, transparency, attention to detail.
I loved how transparent you were about your the last bit of the answer, because I feel that's a weakness that I share, which is I find it very, very hard to celebrate even the little wins, if not them, even if so major wins, I still feel a lot of people celebrate, but I feel the team needs those little like bounties of appreciation
Yeah.
when they are doing those operations. And I feel this is something which I personally realized that I wasn't doing right. But this was such an incredible answer, and for the audience, I'm gonna probably summarize learnings that I was taking away from it. One thing was show don't tell, right? If as a founder you want something to be implemented, you have to implement it first. Like my dad used to say that if you want people to come at 10 a.m. in the office, you have to reach there by 9:45, 9:50. Like otherwise people won't. Of course, this is the archaic way of running a business, but it's really, really important. And second is that culture flows.
Yeah.
We expect things from people which probably we don't even do, which can send a wrong message. I think that's incredible. I'm going to get a very, very sort of a repeated question out of the way very, very quickly.
No worries.
And I think I've seen you answer this like a bunch of times, but because everybody has asked this question, I'm going to ask it again. Who needs this? Like,
Yeah.
how do you tackle? Like, okay, don't answer, but I want to understand, how do you tackle this question? Who needs Zepto? Who needs 10-minute delivery? Kisko chahiye? How do
Yeah.
you tackle it?
So I'll I'll give you the actual answer, right? In terms of, I know you would have heard it. I'll give you the answer, and then I'll also talk to you about how I tackle it. See,
Hmm.
one of the things that I didn't mention, right, there are dozens of pieces that are important in terms
Right.
of our culture at Zepto. One of them is incredibly data oriented, like a high degree of data orientation. So for us, when we talk about, okay, who even cares about 10-minute delivery, uh, we just say, look, we can have a debate, right? We can have a philosophical 140 character debate on Twitter to say, X versus Y, and I need this, you don't need this. And essentially, we're talking in terms of units of one, right? But today, Zepto is operating at a scale where we do lakhs and lakhs of orders every day, right? We're in a position where millions of orders a week at a scale of thousands of crores of revenue per year, right? And as a result of that, what Ayush thinks, or what even Adit thinks, as a unit of n equal to 1 really doesn't matter when you're operating at lakhs and lakhs of orders a
Hmm.
day and millions of unique customers that interact with the platform on a weekly and monthly basis.
Right.
So when we look at scale, right, data is the truth bearer, right? And for us, it's very simple. When you look at consumer transaction labs in India today, Zepto's got the highest NPS score, full stop. NPS, by the way, for folks in the audience, Net Promoter Score, it's a measure of customer experience and satisfaction, right? So we're in an 87-point NPS, stable right now as of last month, May average, compared to any e-commerce platform or hyperlocal commerce platform would be between 50 to 65 points, right? So we've got an incredible customer satisfaction score. Retention, which is how many people come back to the platform, month one buyer retention is 63% compared to 35 to 40% for traditional e-commerce, right? So customers are loving the platform. That's in the data. More people are coming back to users, and when people finish using the platform, they rate us 5 stars, right? So they enjoy the experience and they're coming back month over month, and the amount of money that we make or the amount of revenue that we generate per customer is much higher than even what you'd see on ride sharing or food delivery, because people are investing significant amounts of their wallet share in the platform. So the data is there, right? And for us, we don't really care about the question. But even when I want to talk to someone that's more interested in the philosophical answer, right, I give people the reality that, look, you know as of like the past 6 months, if I take all the data of the past 6 months, 2022
Hmm.
roughly, I look at our median delivery time, it's around 9 minutes, right? And we can say 9-minute delivery technically and be intellectually honest, but we say 10-minute delivery because there is a certain brand cut through there that's helpful for us. And when we say 10-minute delivery versus rapid delivery, there is a difference in how much conversion customers have, how many people respond to that messaging, and we see that in our customer acquisition costs as well, right? So 10-minute delivery is a very solid brand cut through when you're communicating to customers. It's just an immediate understanding of, wow, I get what this brand is going to deliver to me in terms of value, which, by the way, many
Right.
apps don't have, right? Or many services don't have. You might say, XYZ company is delivering delivering excellent experiences, etc., whatever, right? For us, we don't need to, like, it's very simple. Zepto, 10-minute grocery delivery, right? It's just the entire thing is communicated. So the brand cut through is strong. But the reality is that people actually fixate on the 10-minute element because it's a very effective brand cut through, one of the reasons why we've grown so fast. But the reality is that if you actually look at the business effectively, we are not a you know 10-minute grocery delivery company. We're a grocery delivery company. And that seems a lot bigger when you remove the word 10-minute, because for some reason 10-minute feels like a narrow market, but
Right.
there's no real difference. The reality is that customers are coming on the platform because we've got 3,500 SKUs that has an 81-point fresh fruits and vegetables NPS, which is 18 points higher than even offline supermarkets have on fruits and vegetables freshness, and we're delivering in 10 minutes, right?
Hmm.
So it's exactly what you need, right? Delivered in the freshness that you like, with convenience that's unparalleled, right? So you basically become that one place that people can actually just get everything that's necessary in this grocery buying chore done in a very short period of time. When you pitch it like that versus a 10-minute delivery company, it starts clicking more that, okay, this is actually something that replaces the chore of getting my groceries and does it in a way where I get the freshness that I need and the SKUs that I want or the products that I want without much hassle, and it comes in 10 minutes. Right. So that's
Hmm.
the functionality. Like, I mean, the way that I would describe it is we're a grocery delivery company. People are loving that. The data is there. And when you actually just dive deeper than just the headline, right, you realize that what the actual value is not just 10 minutes. If you were delivering in 9 minutes or 11 minutes, it doesn't make a difference. But what does make a difference is that element of instantaneousness, that feeling of it, coupled with the right assortment and the right freshness. That's when you have like a large company, right? So yeah, that's the way that I answer the question. And I think more
Hmm.
importantly, nowadays when people ask me that question, I just say, just talk to the 5 million people that have placed an order on Zepto, right, over the past 6 months. Like, I don't know why. Like, you just have to ask them.
That's the thug life answer. Those glasses coming in. I think that's the which a lot of people should get now. Do you want to take a moment to have some water?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I've just got a bit of a, but yeah.
Super. That's incredible. Yeah, a couple of people have asked this very fun question, which is, and now I'm wondering after looking at that question, what is the name Zepto? Like, how did this name
Yeah.
come?
Yeah. So Zepto is the shortest unit of measurable time in physics. A zeptosecond is,
Ooh,
I think, 10 to the power minus 23 seconds. So it's like this shortest unit of time that's ever been measured in history. So that's why Zepto comes from. In summary, and there were all sorts of reasons why we picked it, but that was basically Keval and I are, we're not the most exciting teenagers. We were more interested in things that most people were not as interested in, like
man.
physics, and science. But yeah, that's probably why.
I think you need to push this reason more, because this is gonna get a lot of, like, especially people that are there, and like people like us and people like who are there in this comment section. It's gonna excite them a lot. These are mostly PCM folks, and I'm gonna actually ask this question to this guy Deep. Deep, you must know this man. You're a software engineer. But anyway, let's come back to Adit as a person. I'm sure a lot of people talk to you as now the co-founder and the CEO of this company. I want to understand that, where did this come from? Where did the element of entrepreneurship come from? Can you, because this is technically like a third startup, like if I count like Kirana Card into like as a separate, but you've started up like
Yeah.
a couple of things, right? Can
Yeah.
you trace it back? Like, did you have business in your family that motivated you, or role models around you? I want to know, like,
Yeah.
कैसे हुआ है कि बहुत छोटे तो थे तुम बहुत ना, मतलब तो शुरू कैसे हुआ?
Yeah. So my mom is an entrepreneur, and she runs her own
Hmm.
business. And she actually started that business when I was very young, so I kind of grew up with that business in a sense. So it was always a big part of family life. It's a uh, recruitment business where
Hmm.
she helps banks hire folks. So it's a different type of business than what we run, but just the element of putting blood, sweat, and tears into something that's your own
Hmm.
was part of the conversation very early on in life. But I think in general, for Kevali and I, we actually never came in and said, okay, we want to be entrepreneurs, right? We had that never existed when we were
Okay.
younger. We were just, so both of us just like building stuff, right? And Kevali was always better than I was in
Hmm.
terms of his technical ability. But we just enjoyed the idea of building something that people would use. And we did that multiple times until one day we got into a position where a lot of people started using one of the things that we built. And we said, wait a second, there's something, this is not just a hobby. People are using this. And we need to now answer their calls of customer support. And, shit is actually starting to happen. And so, the
Right.
bad
Okay.
language. But as a result of that, I mean, we just came in and said, okay, this is interesting, and now there's probably the reality that people might actually pay to use a platform that we create, and that's when we realized that this hobby of ours of actually building out interesting technology products can actually be a very rewarding career path. So
Hmm.
that's when we came in and said, but it always originated from the excitement to build something. Like even when Keval and I started Kirana Card, which eventually became Zepto, um, it was just two guys stuck in uh, a pretty
Had
tight apartment in Andheri in Mumbai in the middle of lockdown, and we were like, man,
right.
we need to get groceries to survive. Like we're highly in a highly worrisome situation. It's lockdown, and we need to figure out how to get groceries. And online platforms are taking 4 5 days to deliver. Most of the
Right.
stores were shut. So it just came out of that, but we never came in and said, okay, we're here to build a business and drop out of school, right? That was never the intention. It sort of evolved into that, which I think if you look at Y Combinator and their philosophy, that's what they say, right? That most, I mean, not most, but a good amount of great companies are built as fun projects that people do when they're bored, right? In the early days. So yeah.
Interesting. And the conversation is about to come to the end, so I'm gonna dive straight into Adit's personal secret diary and understand what are Zepto's next plans. Where are we headed? Zepto Cafe. I just saw the announcement. What's in the news? Let's just assume nobody's here, and let's answer this question in a silo.
Yeah.
What are the next steps forward?
Look, so we're in a position where the reason why we've had success
Mhm.
in terms of capital raises, where we've raised like $360 million in the past 9 months. The predominant reason why that's happened is because of very strong focus on capital efficiency. and we're in a
Hmm.
position where the you know the amount of capital we've used versus the revenue that we have, that ratio is best in class, right, compared to consumer transactional platforms in India and globally in Q-commerce, right? So that's one thing that we're going to double down on, right? That focus on capital efficiency and unit economics. It's the reason why investors have had confidence in us so far, that we've gotten micro markets to profitable, and we've got all our later micro markets now coming into that zone as well. And we're in a
Hmm.
position where, in terms of the capital that we spend and the revenue that we have, it's a pretty comforting ratio. So we're doubling down on that. I think obviously in a market like this, you hear that from multiple entrepreneurs, but that's actually been the philosophy since day one. So focusing predominantly on capital efficiency and unit economics, and beyond that, I think the usual objectives. You mentioned our growth rate over the past Q4 calendar year 2021 and Q1 calendar year 22.
Hmm.
We want to continue growing incredibly fast. We're in a position where we're still growing in terms of multiples and not in terms of percentages, which is a privileged position to be. It also gives us a sense of how
Absolutely.
large the market is, right? So very excited about that. And yeah, I mean, I think we're just going to keep growing in a way that's capital efficient. And beyond that, you mentioned some initiatives, things like Zepto Cafe, we're excited about, right? The idea that you can pick up coffee and chai along with your groceries is great, because if you walk into a 24/7 in Delhi, for example, some of you might be familiar, even things like a Nature's Basket, right? You'll find a cafe along with your groceries. Or even if you walk into 7-Eleven in the United States, one of the biggest sellers that 7-Eleven has is a cup of coffee with your groceries, right? It's just sort of a pick me up while you're doing a chore. And we saw that request coming in from lots of our customers. So we launched a
Hmm.
pilot for Cafe. It did incredibly well in a very short period of time. And now we're scaling that across the country. In fact, as we speak, we've launched about two dozen sort of Zepto Cafe micro markets in this week, and we're going to probably going to 3x that number in the next month and a half or so. So we're feeling pretty excited about that. And beyond that, it's just again, core focus on execution. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to do, right? A lot of things that we can continue to improve, like I mentioned. That's
Right.
really, or unfortunately, most of what we obsess about is how can we just make this better.
That's incredible, yaar. Adit, thank you so much for your time and all these insights. It was lovely talking to you. And I'll just, just to wrap this conversation off, you're extremely humble and transparent, which is something that you don't see in a lot of people, especially in the startup industry and culture. Thanks so much for being like this, sort of humble about it. And thank you so much for giving us your time. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I don't know if you have time to pick up questions from the audience, but I don't know if CL folks, if somebody can, or I think Adit, you also have like I think like an upper cap. Let me know
I'm
if you
I'm,
can
I'm,
take.
I'm good for time if the Bits Pilani team is okay.
I mean, guys, can somebody give me like a quick? Okay, we can do two questions.
Okay.
Um, super. I think this a question for Adit's rapid discovery is it was a market gap that you identified. Any other market gaps that you thought or have? I think this person is just simply asking, do you have any other startup idea that?
I mean, honestly, you know the so the way I look at it, and Ayush uh, articulated this very well, right? Which is, you have to show reality on a micro scale before you even start thinking about the big picture. Even today, I still think of the scale that we're at as medium picture, right? There's a much
Hmm.
bigger picture, but that we now need to move forward to. In terms of in terms of the concept of having a startup idea, to answer the question, I think I don't have one on me. Like I don't really spend too much time thinking about that. What I will say is that it's not productive either, right? Because whatever I tell you will almost certainly be wrong, right? In terms of whatever assumption I've made, because precisely because I've not gone into the micro levels of whatever I would say, any startup idea that might be in like the back of my mind somewhere. The answer, the right answer to that question is, for you to have a successful startup idea, whatever you being wrong. And we also were like wrong multiple times before we ended up being right. You'll never find a startup idea that was like, this is my idea, it worked, brilliant, and we're off to the races, right? And we're growing the company. That's never happens, right? As much
Right.
as I would have liked it to be the case. So what I
Hmm.
would would recommend is throw yourself out there at anything, right, that you find exciting and you think is a big problem. Even if you're not sure about a lot of things, throw yourself at it. The best way to get something as a like quote unquote real startup idea is to have micro validation for it. Other than that, it's just hearsay. So if you can show, hey, I built something or I've spoken to X number of people and did something for them that they were willing to pay for, they were excited about, right? That is much more valuable than even the best startup entrepreneur in the ecosystem coming in and saying you should do X, right? 100 customers saying something is much better than even uh, the most eloquent or the most important startup founder. So yeah, what I'll say is just throw yourself at something, and you'll figure it out just by talking to customers. The reality will be on the ground. It will never be a big picture answer almost all the time.
That makes a lot of sense. I hope you got your answer, but I think it was a much more detailed answer that probably this person expected. But thanks so much for the time. I think we can't take another question, sadly, because we have another session after this. But thank you so much, Adit. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad
Yep.
we got a chance to do this.
And yeah,
Thanks.
my it's great chatting with you as well, Ayush, and thanks a ton for taking the time. And it's been lovely.
Thank you.
All right. I think I speak for everyone when I say that was an engaging and insightful conversation. I'd like to thank both Mr. Palicha and Mr. Bhargava for their time. With their unique takes on different agendas, it's clear that the budding entrepreneurs in our audience have a lot of food for thought. It was a pleasure having you both join us. I would now like to present the final session for the first ever India Portfolio Summit, ONDC, Empowering the Merchant. And for this, we're joined by Mr. Vibhor Jain, CEO at ONDC.